Two families, one unbearable heartbreak.
I've been through hell and back.
It doesn't seem real. There's still days that we wake up and look for him.
A senseless crash and 2 young lives taken.
This is an outrageous situation.
2 News Investigates discovered the major warning signs before the crash.
I want there to be answers.
And what could have possibly saved the lives of 2 young boys.
I want there to be things that are held accountable for.
Thank you for joining us for this 2 News Investigates special. I'm Wendy Halloran.
And I'm Mark Cabell. In May of 2022, 2 3-year-old boys were killed when a parolee with a documented history of meth addiction slammed through a horse stable and hit both of them.
When 2 News started investigating, we found multiple failures in his supervision. We start with the document the Department of Corrections fought to keep secret. It shows the parolee tested positive for drugs 3 weeks before the crash, stopped going to drug treatment, and all the while APMP claims it had no clue.
Odin's birthday is coming up in 2 months, and we don't really know what to do. He would be 4.
He's so grumpy.
He had so much love and kindness and so many things to offer this world that were robbed of him.
The Ratliff family and the Jackson family.
Hunter, are you having fun? Yeah. What you doing?
Forever changed by the events on May 2nd of last year. A car speeding down 2300 North and 16,000 West in Eagle Mountain smashed through several fences and horse corrals at Cedar Valley Stables, instantly killing Odin Ratliff and Hunter Jackson. Prosecutors say Cody Barlow was behind the wheel of that car. On parole at the time, adult probation and parole was responsible for supervising him. But entries in Offender Track, APMP's primary database we obtained from a whistleblower, show Barlow violated the terms of his parole multiple times before this deadly crash. April 2nd, 2022, Barlow did not show up for a random drug test at Wasatch Behavioral Health. April 11th, 2022, Barlow showed up for drug testing at Wasatch and was positive for amphetamines and methamphetamine. April 25th, Barlow showed up for an office visit. The APNP agent wrote he is doing his treatment and drug testing. But as you're about to see, that couldn't be farther from the truth. The deadly wreck happened 1 week after that office visit. The day after the crash, his APNP agent created a new entry in Offender Track. He wrote, quote, I reached out to his case manager at Wasatch Behavioral Health. In talking with his case manager, I learned Mr. Barlow failed to report for a random drug test on April 2nd. He then reported for a random drug test on April 11th. The results of this drug test showed Mr. Barlow positive for amphetamines and methamphetamine. The entry then says his case manager made multiple attempts to reach Mr. Barlow to discuss this positive UA to no avail. Mr. Barlow failed to make any further contact with treatment and discuss this positive test. The entry then says Wasatch Behavioral Health did not notify me of this positive UA until I reached out to them today, May 3rd, 2022. I reached out to the executive director of Wasatch Behavioral Health. In an email, Dr. Jurgen Korbanka wrote, Wasatch Behavioral Health has no formal agreements, contracts, or obligations to report treatment compliance to other agencies. That means Barlow tested positive for amphetamines and meth and for 21 days wasn't going to drug treatment. Adult probation and parole claims it had no clue and didn't check to find out.
This is an outrageous situation where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Paul Cassell is a professor of criminal law at the University of Utah and a former federal judge.
It's absurd that the people doing the drug testing wouldn't be contractually obligated to immediately report when they see positive drug testing.
Does it appear from what you've seen that he was properly supervised?
This looks like a complete failure of supervision here.
For Teresa Ratliff, it's unfathomable.
The end result is I held my son dead in my arms, and no parent should ever have to go through that. No one. And if there are people who are accountable, they should be held accountable.
The Department of Corrections told KUTV it does not maintain contractual agreements with specific treatment providers for services, and that if an individual is on parole, They request the parolee sign a release of information so the provider can share information with AP&P. Providers typically provide monthly treatment reports to AP&P.
I've repeatedly taken failures in the adult probation and parole system to Utah's top boss, Governor Cox, for answers. Changes were promised by both the Department of Corrections and the governor. When no one wanted to talk about these latest young victims, I tracked Governor Cox down for answers.
You want to keep going?
The end result is I
Okay,
held
let's
my
go.
son dead in my arms, and no parent should ever have to go through that. No one. And if there are people who are accountable, they should be held accountable.
3-year-old Odin Ratliff and 3-year-old Hunter Jackson were killed when Utah County Sheriff's officials say a car driven by Cody Barlow smashed through a horse stable where they were playing in on May 2nd of last year. Barlow has a documented history with methamphetamine and was on parole at the time. My investigation found he violated the terms of his parole agreement multiple times in the weeks leading up to the crash, testing positive for methamphetamine, and he stopped going to treatment. All the while, AP&P, who was in charge of his supervision, claims they didn't know either of those things. I reached out to Dan Blanchard, the director of AP&P, and Brian Nilsson, the head of the Department of Corrections, and told them about the evidence I have. Both refused to speak with me.
So I took these same questions to Utah Governor Spencer Cox, who is ultimately the person over the Department of Corrections, but he has declined to do another interview since 2021 when he told me this.
But if someone doesn't do their job, then bad things happen, and people have to be held accountable for that.
After 21 months of repeated denials to my requests for an interview with the governor about this, I tried to talk to him at an event where he was supposed to do interviews with the media, but instead left before anyone could get an interview with him.
I'm trying to get an interview with you. I know you have to go, but Governor Cox, please, you told me, in 2021 that you would hold AP&P accountable. You said people have to do their jobs when bad things happen. You're not going to talk? Governor Cox, please.
2 little boys have lost their lives. What do you think about what I have shared with you?
I think it's absolutely deplorable.
State Representative Judy Weeks-Roner sits on the House Judiciary Committee.
Shame on us. It needs to change.
Hunter, are you having fun?
I feel so bad for these 2 little boys' parents. It's a travesty, and we can do better.
After that encounter with the governor, I went to his monthly press briefing where he was more willing to answer questions. Cody Barlow, the man charged with the deaths of the 2 3-year-old boys, tested positive for drugs, and then for 3 straight weeks before their deaths, stopped going to drug treatment. And AP&P didn't have a clue about that until after the fact. Is that acceptable?
No, there should be better communication. When someone doesn't show up to drug court, that should be communicated back to AP&P immediately to let them know that there is a problem out there.
On the day after the children were killed, Barlow's agent entered into offender track that Wasatch Behavioral Health, where Barlow was ordered to go for drug treatment as a condition of his parole agreement, did not tell him. However, it's AP&P's responsibility to check in with Wasatch to make sure Barlow was attending drug treatment. Currently,
Brian?
no mandatory compliance reporting to AP&P for private treatment organizations. They
Right.
don't
I
have
would love to see that
contractual
change.
obligations. What would you do to change that?
I would pass a law that says they have to report.
Now, a legislative audit conducted on AP&P recommended agents work with providers to establish better communication on reporting drug test results and other behavioral concerns. During the legislative session, Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby attempted to run a bill to close the gap, but ran out of time during the last legislative session. It's expected to be brought up again during the session in February.
I don't think there was any one breakdown. I think there was probably multiple breakdowns. And unfortunately, that cost the lives of 2 young children.
After that breakdown, we wanted to learn more from treatment providers. Now, we've been reporting on substance use for 3 years now as part of our Addicted Utah reporting. So Jim Spiewak went to talk with treatment service providers and found what they call a blind spot in the system.
We always called him an angel because that's exactly what he was.
Last night, 2 News chief investigative reporter Wendy Halloran reported on how parolee Kent Cody Barlow is accused of missing drug treatment and failing a drug test just weeks before tragically killing 3-year-olds Hunter Jackson and Odin Ratliff. Here is Odin's mother, Teresa.
It doesn't seem real. There's still days that we wake up and look for him. Because that's what our life was him. And it still is.
The Addicted Utah team found that in Utah, there was mandated reporting for some treatment programs for missed and failed drug tests. That changed during the expansion of Medicaid just a few years back. So today, there's just best practices.
It's definitely a blind spot in the system. Right hand talking to the left hand is the ideal. It's not often what happens.
Jared Ferguson is the director of mental health for treatment provider First Step House. First Step House was not involved in Barlow's case, and Ferguson says they have a full-time staff member who reports missed tests to adult probation and parole within 24 hours. He would like to see that required by law and financially incentivized for accountability.
This might be a situation where we could have done more sooner to mandate this kind of reporting.
Which is too late for Odin's mother, who is now just left with his memories.
It didn't matter whatever it was. You were his friend, you were a person of his, and he would take you anywhere and everywhere.
So Ferguson says this lack of standardization, it's the real issue here. He's not aware of any standardized reporting database system for missed drug testing that all parties can easily and quickly get access to.
Up next, as I dug deeper into Kent Cody Barlow's background, I found multiple past charges against him. Ones that, if handled different, could have potentially prevented this tragedy.
Those 2 little boys are still clear in my brain and probably will be for the rest of my life.
And the managers of the stables where this tragedy happened speak out as well. Stay with us. A legislative audit released in November of last year, triggered by our 2 News Investigates reports focused on Board of Pardons and Parole. It found that, quote, the board still lacks a clearly defined paroling philosophy and could better ensure public safety is appropriately prioritized.
For more than a year, we've been reporting on Kent Cody Barlow, the man charged with killing 3-year-old Hunter Jackson and 3-year-old Odin Ratliff in Eagle Mountain in May of 2022. As we dug deeper, we found a crime Kent Cody Barlow committed before this tragedy that sent him back to prison. But did the punishment fit the crime? And why were a handful of drug charges dismissed to begin with? Things that could have kept him in prison longer.
And there's not a day, I'm here every day, that I don't walk past and it doesn't go through my head what was in that dirt.
This wasn't the first time Kent Cody Barlow was accused of doing over 100 miles an hour. This is body camera footage from 2019. Barlow stole a motorcycle.
He just crashed. Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
A parole fugitive on the run. He stole a Draper police cruiser.
He's getting in my car! Get out of my car! He's fleeing in my patrol car. You're over 100.
Leading Draper and Cottonwood Heights officers on a high-speed chase.
I got out of the damn way.
The officers just coming off an adrenaline rush.
Let's figure out charges together, because obviously we have a ton of charges.
Arrested Barlow on 16 charges. Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill charged him with 6 counts, but then gave him a plea deal that involved this case and another case that involved drug charges from July of 2019. In the deal, Gill dropped a felony drug charge that would have added time to Barlow's sentence and dismissed the second felony drug case entirely.
There's needles there, so be careful.
Even though he had 2 prior convictions for drugs, Barlow was sentenced in March 2021 to a total of 1 to 20 years behind bars, but he had been in prison since his arrest in August 2019.
Would you be agreeable to another parole?
Yes.
It's September 16, 2021. Barlow is before a parole hearing officer on parole violations from that chase.
As far as decisions, are they going by matrices or?
Pretty much, but you're over your guideline. They can do whatever they want. It's the
Right.
board.
Utah operates in an indeterminate sentencing system, which allows the board to exercise substantial discretion in making its decisions. Barlow's sentencing guideline date was 18 months.
Your guideline date has passed. It was earlier this year.
The board decided 26 months was enough time and paroled him again on October 26, 2021. In a statement from the parole board, Chief Hearing Officer Brett Varos says it was approximately 8 months and 1 week over his sentencing guideline date. They factored in this.
Do you have any write-ups since the 2019 alcohol write-up?
No.
Barlow was caught with brew in prison but completed substance abuse treatment. 7 months after he was paroled, prosecutors say he was high on meth, driving more than 100 miles an hour when he struck and killed the 2 little boys. Stable manager Barb Brooks is outraged.
He should not have ever been out.
Was Cody Barlow a danger to the community?
Yes, he was.
State Representative Judy Weeks-Rohner.
I'm grateful that you brought this to my attention.
She introduced House Bill 246. It would require the parole board to prioritize public safety when making a decision to parole an offender.
I believe that we should have prisoners paroled if they should be, but we shouldn't have dangerous criminals on the street.
In February, I asked Governor Cox about this case, parole board members he appoints, and Rohner's bill.
As of late, there have been some deadly decisions. What is your response to that?
I would sign the bill.
House Bill 246 was passed by the legislature and signed into law by Governor Cox earlier this year.
I want them to know that this will always be their happy place.
Up next, the managers of Cedar Valley Stables speaking out what they hope happens in this case.
And our whole world just had blown up.
Those 2 little boys are still clear in my brain and probably will be for the rest of my life.
Finally tonight, I was able to sit down with the managers of Cedar Valley Stables where this tragic sequence of events unfolded.
Barb Brooks and Kelly Gee want you to know what happened, and for the families of Odin Ratliff and Hunter Jackson to know that they are heartbroken for them, but they are also demanding justice.
Kind of. Good job, Eddie.
Hunter Jackson and Odin Ratliff's friend shoot at Cedar Valley Stables 1 week before the unimaginable happened.
And all of a sudden, metal crushing sounds.
Barb Brooks was first to see the wreckage.
And then it just went to deathly silent. And I see these 2 guys in my horse's stall. All of this was collapsed.
An SUV driven by Cody Barlow is upside down where her horse would normally be standing.
I heard Teresa scream Odin's name, and they ran underneath the collapsed roof.
Her husband Kelly made Teresa Ratliff, Odin's mom, leave.
I know when I got Teresa out, and I didn't want the other mother coming in there at all.
Brooke Jackson is Hunter's mom.
Kelly, he told her, don't come under here. Go call your husband.
That night began the nightmare they have been living.
I didn't believe it. I kept saying, are you sure? Are you sure? And he said, yeah, they're gone.
She called 911.
I screamed into the phone, the babies are dead. And she told me that responders were on their way. And even though they were gone, he was not going to leave them alone. He was going to make sure that they had someone there to protect them.
Kelly stayed under the collapsed roof waiting for the ambulance to come down the road.
Those 2 little boys are still clear in my brain and probably will be for the rest of my life.
Shock turned to anger.
I looked over and seen the accused hanging upside down in his car. And 2 little babies dead, but he's still breathing. Then I went into pure anger at that point.
Later that night, he used a tractor to pull the mangled heap of metal that was upside down out of the stable.
Those images, the sound, the smell of that burning car, it's never going to go away.
The emotional scarring has taken its toll. Both are devastated.
For me, my heart breaks every time I see both parents here. It's hard for me.
And demanding accountability.
I just want justice done.
I need the state of Utah, I need the city and everybody involved to put him away where he needs to be.
As the memories of two little boys playing with toy tractors are etched in the sand, statues of the forever friends left by an anonymous person along the fence post keep their memories alive.
I would want them to know that their horses love them, that they're still here. This was their happy place. I want them to know that this will always be their happy place. And their parents will always have this place to come and enjoy and be with them.
There have been monumental changes at the Department of Corrections since our reporting began. UDC Executive Director Jim Hudspeth and APMP Deputy Director Glenn Erkenbrack suddenly retired. UDC Executive Director Brian Nilsson was forced out. Governor Cox appointed Brian Redd to replace him, and he immediately began replacing top leadership. Most significantly, Redd removed APMP Director Dan Blanchard and notified me exclusively and thanked me for the work we have done. We have just revealed the deadly consequences of failed parole supervision and what's beneath the blind spot.
The case is far from over, though, and it's one of our 2 News Investigates team is watching very closely, and we will keep you updated on that. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good night.